Art-Centric Podcast with Rafi and Klee.
Hola, you amazing artist. It's Rafi.
And Klee.
And today we're going to talk about following your bliss.
What does it mean? How do you do it?
Yeah. So what does it mean? How do you do it? You know, the reason that I wanted to talk about this particular subject is because a lot of times you hear that, right? You hear follow your bliss, you know, and it sounds really, really good, right? Because there's a huge truth to that, following your bliss as an artist, following your bliss in life. But then the practical way of being able to do that, like how do you actually follow your bliss, right? Is it always this big giant thing where like you're making this life decision, or is it the little things, right? Because I remember that was one of those things that like it really resonated with me, like follow your bliss, like that makes sense. If you follow your happiness, if you follow your passion, if you follow your heart, then it's going to lead to amazing, great things and opportunities that you don't even know are there. You're going to push through comfort zones. You're going to do things that you've been afraid to do. You're basically going to do things like you've not done them before. And that with that comes that change in your life. And it's so important. But on a practical level, it's like, unless you're making a huge decision, it's like, what does that even mean?
I feel like it's easy to not notice what you're choosing in the smaller moments in day-to-day life unless you're kind of like oriented towards thinking about this, because life in general can be very distracting in a lot of ways for humans. But a lot of times it is like a series of little things that end up leading to a bigger thing. And so I think practical ways that you could orient yourself in that direction and like what that means and how to actually use it is very helpful to think about.
Zara says, for me, it's the subtle little things like following candy crumbs.
Totally.
Beautifully put,
Exactly.
Zara. Yeah.
Tish said, attitude of gratitude is highly underrated because it sounds hokey, but it helps me create my happiness, or bliss in this case. It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Attitude, you know, it's funny. Attitude of gratitude does sound hokey. It has been overused, but it is a powerful thing. It basically just means being in a state of appreciation and following the things that you appreciate, the things that you enjoy. It's a very powerful thing. Even though it has over the years gotten a little bit of a stigma attached to it.
Yeah, when it became mainstream, I feel like, you know, it did become sort of cliche. It did get used in ways that maybe were not what it was actually meant to be. And so it does have a little connotation now. But at its core, essentially, orienting yourself to move through your life as though everything is working out, you're being very choosy about what you're letting rattle you. I think that's what I've been thinking about a lot lately is like, there's really not that much to me that's worth getting rattled over, because of how it makes me feel in my body, first and foremost. But like, if I can just maintain a place of neutrality even and move into like a state of gratitude, just not letting myself get rattled by the little things, the little abrasive things in life.
Tyler says, by the way, you guys, if you're listening to this, we have our amazing Rogue Artist family here with us. So if you hear us reading comments, that's who we're reading the comments from. And Tyler says, to quote Diana Troy, we don't have time to talk about time. There is no time.
Jen just said, you know, some people say attitude is altitude, and I always roll my eyes at it, but I know it is inherently correct. I'm just a pessimistic.
It's funny because, Ginger, like, I go through that too. You know, it's funny because I think when something is overused, because, like, appreciation is powerful. Gratitude is a powerful thing, right? Because when you look at it practically, let's say you wake up in the morning, and you've already formed the habit of like just going down a downward spiral of pessimistic negativity.
None of us do that,
right?
But just in case hypothetically
just
you
in
know
case,
someone.
Hypothetically, that's what we do. And the way that it gets perceived is like, just smile and pretend like everything is okay. In fact, you've heard people like act as if, right? They totally take the act as if out of context.
And then you're like,
yeah, just pretend like everything is okay. And it's like, you can't, that's essentially what we already do that puts us in trouble, right? That gets us in trouble, which is, oh, I'm struggling with this thing, but I got to go to work. So I better just bury it deep down into the recesses of my being,
where it can manifest later.
Where eventually it's going to come out to the surface and I'm going to explode. And like this is one of the problems that we've had, is that toxic positivity, where you've got somebody smiling at you and their eye is twitching because they're ready to explode on the inside. And that's not appreciation. That's not gratitude, you know? And and I think that that's where the stigma comes from.
I agree with you. Part of the gratitude, part of the whole, let me just call it the whole person living process, right, is actually being present with your full spectrum of emotions, but not allowing yourself to drown in them, I think, is that balance that we're looking for. And Tish is pointing out, even if you can find one or two minor things, little things to be grateful for, having a roof over your head, having air in your lungs,
having toothpaste.
That's
a great one.
What a great thing to have.
Yep.
It seems trivial, but it really can move you, at least if you're feeling negative emotions, at least orient you in the direction of feeling neutrality, where you could sit with the emotion and really process it. We're not trying to bury it. We're not trying to push it away, but we're not trying to live there in that place. And I think that's really important, because it's easy when you're distracted by reality to just be like stressed out, oriented negatively. Our brains are wired to protect us, so we look for the problem a lot of times instead of looking for opportunities. And so it is a conscious effort.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but like when I get into studio, like let's say that I'm not focused on the things that I appreciate, right? And maybe I've gone down this downward spiral of like lack of money mentality, lack of opportunities. Why has this person not emailed me back? Going down the spiral of like Instagram is, like social media is just all blah, 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 and like just completely like in that place. And then I get into studio and I have a really difficult time finding my creativity. And I think that the thing about that is that like creativity in itself is a very expansive force. It is a very, very expansive force. And when you find yourself like stuck in this place, right, you have to go through that stuff, right? You have to go, you're going to wake up, you're going to have your insecurities, you're going to have your doubts, you're going to have your fears, and you don't want to bury that stuff down. You want to allow yourself to feel that and just kind of process those emotions and then move on from there. Because they dissipate, right? They don't really have anything. When you stop and you notice this moment right now, usually you're good, right? Yeah. And if you're not good, if something is going on, you are in the moment taking care of it like that, right? It's when you're thinking about this possible future that is not great, that's usually when you find yourself downward spiraling.
Or you're ruminating on something that happened that you're letting affect you over and over and over again.
Yeah, and then on top of that, you get into studio and you're adding pressure to yourself, right? Because you're like, oh, well, I should be creating something. And then that's where you start shitting on yourself about all the things that you should be doing in that moment as a creative. Meanwhile, talking to yourself in a way that you wouldn't allow anybody else to talk to you in, which is like, look at you. You can't even create stuff. You're not even creative enough. You're running out of ideas. This and this, blah, blah, blah. You can't even survive as this. You're never going to be able to do this. You're never going to. And then you get caught in that spiral and you expect yourself to be creative. You expect yourself to be able to create magic when you are stuck in this spiral, this Ouroboros of like bull crap that is just you talking yourself down, right? And what I have found is that like in the mornings, it's almost like this teeter-totter, right? where it's like you could go any way. You could go any way, right? So if I wake up and I'm thinking about like, oh, today I got to do this, like, oh, we got that interview tomorrow morning. And if I wake up, if I'm already pre-paving that like it's going to be nightmarish, right? Because it's happening at 9 a.m. And am I going to be ready for this? Am I even going to be awake? Am I going to have time for coffee? Am I going to have time to poo before they get here?
These are all important things.
These are all important things. But if I'm already pre-paving it being a nightmare, then the experience isn't going to be good. And it's probably going to have a major impact on the rest of my day. Now, I could think really, really good thoughts right now and appreciate the opportunity and all that stuff and get into a good place right now. But in the morning when I wake up, I'm going to have to recalibrate my teeter-totter to make sure that I don't go in a direction where I'm like, oh, well, now I got to, and like all that stuff. And it's just, I think really it comes down to that awareness of being in that place, knowing that it's going to impact my creativity. It's going to impact my self-worth. It's going to impact the way that I interact with other people. It's going to impact my art business. It's going to impact everything that I do. And the truth is that some people are really used to being in that place. I was used to being in that place back when I was working in corporate. It was just normal. That was just every day. But that's not the way that I want to live my life. And I've seen the benefits of living a different way. So it's like once you've experienced it, like you can't go back.
It's true. You can't. I want to read a few of these comments.
Yeah.
And then I thought it'd be fun to kind of talk about some of the things that we're asking and saying to ourselves in recent times.
Okay.
Jinja said, after a recent loss, Handsome and I had a night trying to find the cheesiest live, love, laugh wall art we could find. That's the night we decided no regrets and Comic Sans will be in our house permanently. Black house paint, full hashtag F it YOLO mode, and that's what we decided on.
That's awesome.
I love that. Tyler said, I have to remind myself to not get annoyed by those kinds of phrases or mantras because the people who say that mean well. So I say, but how? And then listen to Jerry Saltz, get to work.
Yep.
Sometimes it might be get to work. Sometimes for me, the best place between this and this is, it is what it is. Like, I'm not going to assign meaning to it if I don't need to. You don't necessarily need to live in the this is bad modality. Why not just be neutral about it? Mostly selfishly, because I'm tired of it affecting my body and my state. It drains energy, so why not just be neutral about it? It is what it is. So when I get triggered by something, I think really the first thing is like, do I need to have these feelings about it? If I do need to have these feelings about it, then what is it at the core that I'm needing right now? And how can I give that to myself? Which leads me to a question that Rafi and I have been asking ourselves a lot lately, regardless of what emotional state we're in, which is, what is the most loving thing I can do for myself right now?
Yep.
And that might be to take a shower, or it might be to go sit on the front porch, or it might be to respond to that email that has been in your inbox that you want to clear from the queue, or it might be to be creative.
You guys might think that we're joking about the taking a shower thing, but the truth of the matter is that when you get into these weird downward spirals where you are forcing creativity, basically, where you're like, all right, I got to get into the studio and I gotta get to work. I gotta do this thing. And you have spent 3 days, like, you're sitting down there. First off, you're not as productive as you would be if you were like in a good place, right? And you go down there and you basically maybe feel like just a dirt rag with flies around you. And you're like, yeah, I could shower later. I don't have time for that. In the mornings, just about every morning, I try and sit and like just meditate, clear my mind, right? Because I know that the chatter is going on. And the chatter is usually like, you can't do, whatever the chatter is, just clear my mind, sit in a state of meditation. Part of the chatter is you don't have time for this. You don't have time to meditate right now. You don't have time to shower right now. You don't have time to take care of yourself right now. You've got things that you got to do. And that's the thing about it, is that I always try to be careful with anything, right? Because you run into the hustle culture mentality, which is like, just you got to work and then you'll be able to play, then you'll be able to relax. And I'm like, honestly, I don't want to live like that in a place where it's always someday I can do this. I would rather just integrate that into my daily life. Like, if I want to have time for myself, then I want to have time for myself and have time for my art, have time for creativity, have time for a walk, have time to be able to spend with Clee, doing something other than just working in the studio, but also enjoying that time of working in the studio. So it's like a lot of people are searching for balance, right? They're searching for balance. They're searching for ways to control time. And really what I've discovered is that it just comes down to having that harmony in your life where you are willing to do the thing that feels the best in that moment where you're taking care of yourself, right? So taking a shower is going to take me, 20, 30 minutes? Sitting and meditating is going to take me, 5 to 15 minutes, right? It's not even an hour.
And if it's going to set you up to be in a better feeling place. I heard myself say on a video call yesterday, and I didn't even realize that I felt this way until I said it to someone. But I was like, there's been a lot of days where like I've become aware that if I feel good about myself, and that includes how I'm showing up in the studio and how I look, and my analytical mind wants to tell me that you don't have time for self-care. But the truth is that I'm going to be in a better place to produce better work if I'm feeling good about myself. That includes feeling pretty. That includes not feeling like a dirty rag with flies around it. So my analytical mind wants me to take my troll self down to the studio and just crank some stuff out, when I know that I would feel much better if I felt. So this whole idea of you don't have time for self-care or whatever's going to put you in a creative mindset is bogus. And so I'm earnestly asking the question, what is the point of that way of thinking? Like, what does it really do for you at the end of the day? And so that's where really this question becomes powerful. Like, what is the most loving thing I can do for myself in this moment?
Yeah, what is the most loving thing I could do for myself? Carrie says something here that I think is really important. Something I heard on one of these podcasts and started doing is getting up early in the morning so that I have an hour or two to paint before work. I put my creative time literally first and go through the rest of my day feeling happier and more fulfilled. Exactly. And I mean, and that's the thing. It's like, what can I do? What is the most loving thing that I could do for myself? And it's realizing like that's actually something that came from our neighbor. She was the first female boiler maker in this area, right? So she was a welder, but her thing was like, I'm going to get up early. I'm going to get up. I'm going to do my creative work. And then my job gets whatever's left.
Whatever energy I have left.
Whatever I have left, that's what they get. But like my creative work comes first. And because of that, like Irma's just a really happy person, and
she's also like an unstoppable force of nature.
She's an unstoppable force of nature. The hard part is going to bed earlier than I want to. Yes, Carrie, that is something that I still struggle with. I feel you deeply.
Yeah. So another question that I'm asking myself all the time, and especially recently because I heard something that was so cool that I resonated with, was like, what is the point in not assuming that your art is the best thing ever? What is the point in assuming anything negative about what you're creating? Why wouldn't you assume that what you're creating is amazing, magical, good energy out in the world? Like, why would we ever waste energy assuming that what we're creating is anything less than the greatest thing? And I kind of want to sit with this, because I know that the brain jar comes up with a lot of reasons why. But really, 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 at the end of the day, like, why would you ever make any other assumption? And what would be the point of doing so with your creativity?
I want everybody that's listening to this, I want you to just take a moment, right? Whether you're creative, whether you're an artist or you're a musician or whatever it is that you create, right? And I want you to just say the words to yourself, like, my art, my creation, whatever it is, man, this is the best thing ever, right? And I want you to feel that in your body and see how it feels. Does it feel like, yeah, it's the best thing ever? Or are you feeling resistance? Are you feeling some kind of resistance? That to me is always an indicator. Like when I feel that resistance, that something bunk is going on in my head, that I've got some thought that doesn't belong to me, or that says, you're supposed to be humble. You're supposed to be this. You can't like your art. I literally had an artist once tell me, you can't like your art. It's
you
okay.
Can't say you like
you
your
can't
art.
say you like your art. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, you're the one that created it. You honestly should be your biggest fan of the art that you create. So it's like things like this, like having that question for yourself and really, really investigating for yourself. Being able to say like, yeah, this is the best thing ever. And it doesn't mean the best thing ever as in this is the best, better than. It's not this is better than.
It doesn't mean better than.
It's not comparing. It's not better than. It is, this is the best thing ever.
I'm fully behind this. I think one of the first things that comes up, people don't want to say that because they're afraid that other people are going to say, no, it isn't, right? They're afraid of the judgment.
Yeah.
The external judgment. And then the question that would come up for that is like, well, that person doesn't know you or your life or the process that gave birth to this creation. And so, really? Like, how much does their input really weigh at the end of the day? What good reason, really, would you ever have for not being fully behind what you're doing and feeling like I'm putting magic into the world? Zara said, agreed. Assume the ultimate best. Pivot the brain jar to answer this, and it will show you. It's a mind ninja muscle to build. Mm-hmm. It's kind of along the same lines of like, what practical reason would I have to make the assumption that this is a negative situation rather than a neutral one? Because you can assign any meaning you want to a situation. And I'm telling you this from being in a real-time place right now where I am facing something that historically has been super negative for me for my whole life. And I'm sitting telling myself, you know what? It's not worth how I feel. It's not worth what it does to my body to feel like this is a negative thing. Instead, I'm going to feel like, at the least, I'm going to feel like it's neutral. It is what it is, and I'm completely unaffected by it. I don't have to care. I choose to care. And at the very best, this is working out for me in some way that I don't yet understand. What practical reason do you have to not choose that? And of course, the knee-jerk answer, at least for me, is like, well, I'm trying to protect myself. But are you really protecting yourself when you assume the worst? I guess that's a question that I've been sitting with. Or is it better to simply kind of take a stoic position at first and then see if you can move that into a feeling like things are working out for you, a feeling like you really do stand behind the artwork you're creating, and a feeling like you really do got this? And I'm not talking about esoteric things here. I'm just talking about, why would you choose stuff that doesn't work for you to move forward? Why wouldn't you choose what's going to help you move forward? But I think we don't think about this because we kind of default to a certain way until we don't anymore. So in the not thinking about it, I guess what I'm saying is like, take the time to ponder these questions, should you so choose to. They've been helping me.
I mean, it's important to ask yourself these questions. You got to think about how many times do you actually, a lot of it is you're searching for validation, right? The question that you ask yourself is like, does this gallery like my art? Do people out there like my art? Do I like my art, right? And versus just asking yourself, like, why wouldn't I be my biggest fan? Like, I'm the one that's putting in all the time. Like, who cares what anybody else says? It's kind of like Inert Flow says, that's just like your opinion, man.
It's one of the greatest things.
Spoken by the dude.
It's one of the greatest things ever.
Yeah. Tish says, my biggest hurdle to happiness was embracing my ADHD and all the things that go with it. It's still a process of catching myself, but I'm better than, anything that is about you is perfect and great. Mm-hmm. Don't buy into the hoopla of using things as a negative thing against yourself simply because people out there use it as a badge or a weapon. Mm-hmm. So like that, and that's the thing. There's a lot of labels and titles out there that people love to use, and those labels and titles are usually attached to some kind of thing that is disguised in a way that makes it seem like there's something wrong with you. And in my humble opinion, I think that there is absolutely nothing wrong with you. You're you. You're you. Now, if you're trying to be like everyone else, if you're trying to conform into a system that already exists, or like, trying to do what everybody else does, then you're gonna feel like you can't get there because that's not you. You are you.
Yeah.
With all your quirks and all your fun and all your craziness and all your weirdness, you are you. And that honestly is the best way to stand out, is being you and following your own bliss, not what other people think that you should do.
Definitely.
I think that that's the biggest thing when it comes to following your bliss, is that like a lot of times we really have to sit down with ourselves and determine for ourselves, like, am I following this because I think
that I'm supposed to?
Is this actually my bliss that I'm following? Or is this what somebody else, that I learned from somebody else, that this is what it means to be happy, or this is what it means to be excited, or this is what it means to just feel, a calm sense of joy? Am I striving for this? That's one of the biggest questions I have to ask myself around the concept of money, right? Because there's all kinds of crap that just throws a wrench into anything when you're thinking about money, because money is kind of entangled with everything else, right? Your self-worth usually is attached to your net worth, and all this stuff. Your hierarchy, there's a hierarchy in labels in society that we kind of fall into. How do you show that you're successful? Well, if I have money, then I'm, there's all this stuff attached to it, and you really got to like second guess all that stuff and grab the ideas that society has behind success and happiness and bliss and joy, and take those and just toss them over your shoulder out the window and start to really define for yourself, what does success look like for me? Mm-hmm. And why? Can I feel successful right now in what I'm doing and achieving? Can I do that right now? Because the truth is that a lot of people are trying to get there. Everybody wants to build an art career. It's like, you have to acknowledge that you are an artist now. If you're creating art, then you are an artist. If you are learning to create art, then you are already an artist, right? There's nothing that you have to achieve in order to be able to call yourself an artist. And you know what? People out there might argue with me on this, and fine, that's great. Argue with me on this and live that way. Good luck to you. Because I've had people argue with me on this. You are an artist. You could call yourself whatever it is that you want to call yourself. Now, if you're waiting around for someone else to call you that before you can validate yourself to be that thing, then you're going to be waiting around a long time, because somebody might decide to call you that. Somebody else is going to say you haven't reached that. All the standards and things, when you are looking outside of yourself for that validation, for that bliss, for that happiness, basically it is a web that is attached to a complex system that is bipolar. It does not make any sense. Some people here will say, yes, you are validated. Some people here will say, you're not good enough. Some people here will say this. Some people there will say, and you will be pulled in so many different directions that you won't even know who you are. So you might as well not waste your time with any of that garbage, and just determine for yourself, what does it mean to me? How can I validate myself? That's really at the core of this following your bliss and creating art and putting your art out there. really that's the thing. That's the foundation that you have to build for yourself.
Yeah. Self-acceptance. There's nothing wrong with you. You are brilliant and wonderful. Self-honesty. Is this my belief structure, or did I just adopt this from... Man, there was so many levels of that I've looked at with my career, with how I take care of myself. And, you just start letting go of the stuff that really wasn't yours to begin with, especially if it doesn't serve you. And redefine. We were watching a thing with a brilliant composer who was doing some pioneering work in music, and who was also like, externally people were like, oh, this is pioneering work. It's so successful. It's this, it's that. You were meant to do it. It's your destiny. And it was like, oh yeah, well, I don't have any money then for research and marketing and this and that. And he had to really sit with himself and redefine what success meant for him as a composer. And I think it's helpful to do that in all areas. Self-acceptance, being honest with yourself, throwing away stuff that doesn't belong to you, that's just weighing you down, and understanding that you really do get to choose how you're looking at everything and how you're navigating everything.
I mean, that's something that I had to do recently, right? Because I have artwork hanging in private and public collections all around the world. I have been interviewed time and time again. I have several awards for what I do. I have a popular YouTube channel. We are pretty popular as far as like what we do as artists. We get invited to speak at conferences, all this stuff. And I remember last year at one point looking around and being like, I do all this stuff. I have published books. I'm putting all this information out there. Why am I not rich? Right? Why am I not like stinking rich right now? And I had to ground myself and pull myself back and realize the success. Like, I don't want for things, but the difference is, like, as far as outside validation, I don't have a net worth that is going to show that I was quote unquote successful. And yet I have an inbox that is full of emails from people that have written to us that something, that the books, one of the videos, a work of art, a song, a piece of jewelry, that something impacted them
in a profound way.
And it's redefining success. You really have to redefine success and understand that like money is a thing that is a side effect of following your joy. It really is a side effect of following your bliss. Tyler says, I've been struggling with the internal voice for a while. It's been screaming that I need to be more, quote unquote, realistic in my art. I do want to get better at figure and anatomy, but I love painting abstract. Yeah, Tyler, that is a really interesting one. You are going... if you decide that you're going to do a series where you're going to do more quote unquote realistic art, and I don't want to like put down realistic, like photorealistic art
awesome.
Or anything like that, because it's awesome. But really at the end of the day, all it is a sequence of techniques, right? And how you lay the marks down, and yes, knowing anatomy and stuff like that, but it's just practice. That really is it. Like being able to do anatomy and know anatomy is just by practicing it. So case in point, the more that you're doing it, the more that you decide that you're going to have maybe a series where that's what you focus on, the better you're going to get at it. That's it. The better you're going to get at it. But it doesn't take away from your abstract art, because doing figurative is one thing. Doing abstract figurative is another thing. Doing abstract is one thing. Doing a landscape is one thing. Doing an abstract landscape is another thing, right? So it's like everything is different. I remember when I first started, I decided that I wanted to challenge myself because I wanted to really speak through body language in my images. And So like for the longest, and this is basically when I started my art career, this is a lot of what I was doing. And so these characters were speaking through body language, and they didn't have faces. They were faceless characters. And I remember and I started growing a collector base based on that. And then one day somebody came up, it's like, so you don't know how to do faces? Some random person that just walked into the booth that wasn't going to buy any of my art anyway. And then that came at me like an arrow because I do know how to do faces. So I was indignant. I was mad. And then what I did was everything that I created for the next 3 months all had faces, right? And I was on a vendetta of doing faces just so that this man could walk into my booth and I could be like, there's a face, After about 3 months of this vendetta and realizing that I was having an impact on my art and an impact on how I felt about my art and how I felt about myself, that I then decided to go back to my own experiment that I was working on, which was doing the faceless people. So it's like, it's through this process of insecurity that you really get to face your insecurities. Mm-hmm. Right. So at this point, if somebody comes into my booth and they're like, oh, you don't know how to do faces, I'd just be like, nope. I don't care.
But sometimes hearing that is one thing. And sometimes you really do have to live the experience before you get to face. In fact, some would argue that hearing the information never really helped anyone get through anything ever. And living the experience is really the only way that we face our insecurities and level up. And me personally, I feel like hearing the information is awesome because it plants that seed. And then honestly, the best thing that can happen next is that I'm forced to face that insecurity in some way in my actual life. And then I get to choose what I'm doing with that situation that's just been presented. And it's okay if you freak out too, because no matter how you navigate that, even if you freak out and then you have wisdom gleaned in the aftermath, that's good. All of it is equally good. It's like whether you sail through it like, oh, I see what's happening here. I am aware. Or you're like, no.
That's the goal. The goal is to see if you can get to a place where you sail through it and you're like observing it. And that's great. Most of the time, chances are your brain's going to be pulling the fire alarm and screaming the entire time. And you just, at that point, you just figure out a way to navigate. And sometimes you you're like, you're also screaming, and that's fine. And then,
everyone is screaming.
Or you take on a vendetta and you're like, I'm going to prove to you that, and that's fine. That's all fine. But like at the end of the day, it's, you have reminded yourself, you have told yourself that you're not good enough, or that you're, you need to improve, all this stuff. You tell yourself these negative things, and the only reason that you believe that they're true is through repetition. So, start repeating something else. Start repeating a better story. And it doesn't mean that it's going to change immediately, but like you might as well start telling yourself a better story, because like there's only so many years of a lifespan for humans. How much of that time do you really want to spend talking crap to yourself?
Right, exactly. So there's a process that I see that happens. This is my personal experience. And I'm really not letting my brain drive the bus anymore, as far as what I should be doing, because it loves me so much. It wants to be helpful. But all the best stuff that has happened in my life and in my career has been heart forward stuff, where I agreed to something before my brain even understood what was happening, or where I signed myself up for something before my brain could talk me out of it. And what I've realized is when you do things that excite you, before you agree to do something, before your brain has the opportunity to talk you out of it, your brain is going to pull the fire alarm as soon as it realizes what you've done, because it wants to keep you safe. And so when your brain is pulling the fire alarm, one thing that you know is that you're probably onto something that's good.
Yeah.
You're following your excitement. And the thing is that when your brain pulls the fire alarm, you don't have to tell it to shut up. You don't have to stuff it in a corner. With Tyler's example, you know, you could have a conversation, right? You need to be more realistic. Interesting perspective, brain.
Interesting
Thanks for
perspective.
the input. Why? Sometimes your brain has an answer for that. Sometimes it's like, oh, I don't know. It's just something I heard somewhere. Sometimes it's like, because what will people say? And it's like, okay.
Yeah.
And you get to decide whether you care about that. But sitting with the feelings, sometimes having a dialogue, sometimes just sitting with the feeling and it dissipates. But really, I'm realizing that your brain pulling the fire alarm usually means that you are going in a direction that actually is following your excitement. There's a lot of confusion in that. There's a lot of anxiety in that for some, and it's part of the process. And your brain wants you to feel like you're making a mistake because you've crept outside of the safety zone.
Yeah. The thing to remember is that, you know, like with Tyler, when something like that happens with any of you, with myself, you would think, you know, we've been doing this professionally for over a decade, and you would think that, like, oh, you don't run into any of those issues anymore, right? And it's like, no, you run into these issues daily, because essentially, if you are in your art career and let's say you're just getting started, a lot of what you need to do is going to push you outside of your comfort zone and take you into uncharted territory. Mm-hmm. And if you've been doing this for over a decade and you want to keep things exciting, a lot of what you're going to do is going to push you outside of comfort zones and send you into uncharted territory. The brain loves systematic planning. Right? It needs to know all the outcomes. This is just the way that it is, since you know, it's been designed to protect us from predators, right? It needs to know that, you know, this is what was going to happen next, this is what's going to happen then, this is what's going to happen there. When you are going outside of your comfort zone and going into unfamiliar territory, you don't have a plan. The only thing that you could do is take it step by step, really, in reality. You could try and plan it out, and a lot of people try to do that, but any of us that have achieved anything knows that plans never go according to plan. It just doesn't. So when the brain is heading into unfamiliar territory, it freaks out. To your brain, that is death, right? It is freaking out. And so you are going to use every single thought, idea that you have to keep you from going in that direction or tell you that you're doing something wrong, right? So in Tyler's example here, right, there's this idea that maybe you heard somewhere that realistic art is whatever, and then you start building this framework that, like, well, people really like realistic art, and that's what people consider real art, and da-da-da-da-da, and you have all these stories that you've compiled and put together, and yet you love doing the abstracts. You allow yourself to do the abstracts, you know, like you say here, you follow up with last night. I took a page out of Pollock and decided to paint 2 abstract paintings. I haven't felt that good about my art for a long time, and I'm eager to paint more for the first time in a long time. Exactly. And that right there, that's feeling, that small feeling is following your bliss. Your brain is like, all right, we're going to do this art career thing. We know that a lot of paintings that are realistic, those are the ones that get a lot of attention, right? It's still coming up. That's just an opinion. It's coming up with like some bullcrap opinion. Those are the ones that get a lot of attention, right? So maybe we should do more of that. And then you get in there and you're analytically trying to work in your studio, right? Which we all know that just doesn't work. That just does not work. Analytically getting in your studio, passion for creating art does not come from your brain. I hate to break it to you, but it does not come from your brain. Passion comes from your heart. That means that you can't be up here when you are in the process of creating. The moment that you are up here, you already have thrown a pattern interrupt into your flow. You can't get in a state of flow if you're stuck in your head.
Anybody who's been in that flow state right? Athletes call it the zone, creatives call it the zone or the flow state. It's something everyone's heard of, and most of us have experienced it. I've experienced it many, many times. My favorite things that I've created have come out of that flow state. Anybody who's been in that flow state knows that that thinking is not what's going on. In fact, it's kind of the absence of thinking that's what's going on. It's really being swept up in the passion of it. Whether it's running or painting or writing a song, there's just this kind of knowing what to do-ness and just being like part of the collaborative process of it.
And giving a good so that to describe what it means to be into flow, right? I'll give you, and I know all of you guys know what it means to be in the flow, but I found it helpful for myself to have this defining imagery that really shows me what it means to be in the flow. So let's say you're having a conversation with someone and you're really enjoying the conversation and you're not thinking about what you're going to say. It's just boom, 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 back and forth. And it's just, there's laughter and there's a flow to that conversation. It's just going back and forth. You're having so much fun. That person's having so much fun. Time flies. You don't even realize how much time has gone by. That is being in a state of flow, right? You're sitting at a job interview and you're thinking about what your answers are going to be, and you're trying to sound a certain way, or you're trying to present yourself in a way that you feel that they will accept you in, and you are whatever. Time does not fly by. It feels like it is taking forever. It is the most uncomfortable feeling. You feel alien to your own body. It just does not work. That is the opposite of being in a state of flow. That means that you're in your head versus in your heart, in that conversation, back and forth. Everything is just flowing. It's just amazing. That right there is exactly what happens when you are in a state of flow in your studio and you're creating, right? Music's playing in the background. You're just singing while you're doing the thing. You're not even really thinking. You might stop for a thought like, oh, let me do some eyelashes on this face, and that's it. And then you get into that flow state. And that's the way that I define it for myself. When I'm in that flow state, I know that I'm following my bliss.
Absolutely. And Rafi and I built our entire career on that flow state without necessarily realizing that that's what we were doing. This is why this to me is kind of the pinnacle, or the crux of following your bliss, is to say yes to things that excite you when they come into your awareness before your analytical mind can talk you out of it because you're not good enough, or you can't afford it, or that you're going to get rejected, or you don't know how it's going to work. Before any of that can set in, if you say yes to things that excite you, and you're just following that excitement, and you're sniffing out the good feelings, is one of the things I've been saying. Our entire career unfolded that way, and that's why it's hard for us to explain what we did from point A to Z, or point whatever we're at, because we're not at the end.
This is why I say that we bumbled our way through it, because it's not like we didn't plan this out, you guys. We didn't know that that's what we were doing. We were just trying to live our best lives.
Yeah, and so even still, it's like the following your bliss is like, when you're, what should I do? I don't know what to do. There's 10 things I could do. Which one should I do? Do the one that feels most exciting and best to you.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be like, the heavens open up and it's like, this is the thing. It could just feel a little bit better than the other thing. Just do that.
Eating a cookie. Like, it could be dancing on the sidewalk in front of your house. But the thing is, and it sounds like mystical or whatever, but in following that excitement and being out in the world and interacting, we were at the right place at the right time to learn about an opportunity, or we happened to be in someone's mind so that they could recommend us for a thing, or we happened to be on someone's radar so that they thought of us when there was an opening somewhere. And that's literally the sum total of like how all of it came to be.
Even if you want to look at it in a mystical way, the fact of the matter is we were doing more. We were more enthusiastic, which made us more memorable.
Yeah.
We were having a lot more fun. And so we were motivated to do even more, to really push out of comfort zones. We were doing things that we had never done before and pushing through the fear with enthusiasm and joy. And just, you end up just doing more and being in more places and interacting with more people. And, I personally believe that there's that magical component where things align perfectly.
Synchronicities
align perfectly, because I've seen it happen over and over. Things that there's no way for me to even plan for that thing. But it just really was all based on following your joy and just doing more with that. Jinja says here, a friend recently had an artwork go viral and got so much hate online. Someone comments, "Tell me you don't understand without telling me you don't understand." She replied, "No." She said she had to make a post saying she is an artist and haters can screw. She's such a positive human, but she literally was just vibing. I asked why reply, and she's like, YouTube algorithms also. No. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, Cass.
Hey, Cass. Cass said there's always a fire alarm in my brain, but it's my fire, and it has helped me grow or learn. That's a beautiful way to say that, Cass.
That is a beautiful way. I mean, and that's the thing. When that fire alarm is going off, you know that you're onto something, right? What happens to a lot of people is that it happens, and then they get, it's kind of like the story that Jinja's saying here. You got to ask yourself, what am I willing to put out there? What is it that means so much? My artwork means so much to me. My message that I have for the world means so much to me. What am I willing to put out there and get criticized for? What am I willing to put out there and get rejected for over and over and over? Right? My message is one of love and empowerment in everything that I create and put out there. Is that worth me getting criticized? Yeah. It's kind of like the same thing. I'm like, screw those people. Whatever. Live your best life, however it is that you want to live your best life. I am going to live my best life, and my best life is putting a message that I feel that is powerful out there. This is what I want to do with my life. Mm-hmm. And most importantly I want to inspire artists, because to me, artists are like a force of nature in the world.
We're dangerous on the dance floor.
We are dangerous on the dance floor. So that's, and to me, that's my mission in life. That's what I want to do. And so am I willing to get criticized for it? Am I willing to get judged? Am I willing to be called names for it? Absolutely. Bring it on.
And by the way, on that note, if you're feeling lukewarm about what you're doing creatively and you don't feel that amount of fire and passion that you're willing to really go for it, then you might have something else inside of you that you have more fire and passion that maybe you talked yourself out of or said you couldn't do. Because really, when it's real like that, when it's really the passion that lives inside of you, it is kind of unstoppable. So if you do find that you're feeling meh about what you're doing, maybe look inside and see if there's a deeper layer of stuff that you're wanting to bring forth, but maybe haven't given yourself permission to.
And it might be something too, where recently I really was thinking about it and discovered that my mission in life is to bring this empowerment to people, to bring this creative empowerment to people, right? This is what I've always loved doing. Whenever we did markets to sell our art, where we were doing festivals and stuff, honestly, I spent less time selling my art and more time having empowering conversations with people, because that's what I loved. I could talk about this stuff all day. In fact, that's the reason that these podcasts are an hour long, because when we tried to reduce them down to 20 minutes, it just doesn't work.
It didn't, yeah.
But understanding that's my mission. The things that I love doing art. I love creating videos. I love writing. I love releasing books. I love speaking in front of groups of people, right? These are the things that I love doing. Creating my art isn't what makes me an artist. Writing books isn't what makes me an author. I am just a creative being that does creative things that has a powerful message underneath. And so like I think that that's the thing that drives all the creativity that I put out there, is that
those creative things, whatever they are the vehicles that carry the message that underpins everything.
Yeah.
To
and so that makes it easy, because if I look at a painting, I love painting. Don't get me like, I love painting. I love creating art. I love it. I love the process of creating art. Is it my passion? You know what I mean? Like, the passion is the thing that drives you. The act of creating art and putting it out there, the act of creating art is a love. It's a love. The act of writing and putting my thoughts down, that's a love. But what's the passion that drives that love? You know, and that's really where I get to the core of the nitty gritty of like, what is that thing that drives me?
If the art's the car, the vehicle, what's the motor?
Yeah.
What's the motor?
That's a great way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah. I love looking at it that way. Let's see. Barbara said, I often hear you both whispering in my ear, growing pains. I'm in transition. I've outgrown my old life, and my new life is in the process of unfolding. My doubts and fears mean I'm on the right path.
Boom, Barbara. That is correct. Jinja even agrees that Barbara, you nailed it right on the head. You're on the brink of something brilliant. Beautifully put.
Jinja said one of my favorite quotes, Rafi, rules are made to be broken by people that want to live life to the fullest. Clee, and you're only a degenerate till your ideas work out.
Exactly.
Then you're a visionary. You got to be a degenerate before you're a visionary.
I absolutely love that. You're only a degenerate until your ideas work out. Yeah.
Ginny said, as many pieces of same size paper as you need. Print clearly, one per sheet, the person or subject, followed by, and all the negative vibes that go with it. Hold each individual piece in both hands. Into the world to let it go. There's no guilt here, only you and your truth. I think there might have been a chunk of that missing, but I see what you're saying. Mm-hmm. Let it go.
Let it go.
This is a physical representation of what I've been doing in my imagination, which is I've been chucking those things and all the negative vibes that go with them into this little imaginary recycling bin. And then like the brightest, sparkliest, like fire, transmutes that into raw potential once again, and that floats off into the
I write about this in the Rogue Artist Survival Guide, where it's like your imagination is the spark of creation. It is such a powerful thing, right? You can utilize that to take that negative comment and literally burn it up into flames, right? And that does something in your neural pathways. It does something in your brain, where it allows you to deal with that in a subconscious way, which, you know, your subconscious thoughts think not in words, it thinks in imagery, you know? So like it really allows you to deal with those things. The problem is that a lot of us subconsciously use our brain to worry about like, oh, I'm not going to have enough money for this. And then, you burst into flames and all that stuff. Like we use our imaginations in a way that we think the worst. And I love the idea of physically even writing it on paper and doing that. I did something similar when I got rid of my old life, my old way of being. I took an old journal and threw it into the fire.
To be transformed,
transmuted. So I love those things.
Cass said, I want to be like Rafi when I grow up. And Clee, she's kind of awesome. Thanks, Cass.
Thank you, Cass. Cass said, fight or flight. My dad says, fight with all your passion and put how you feel on the canvas.
On the canvas.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, the feelings. I mean, that's the thing. It's that passion. That passion drives me. A lot of my artwork has to do with moments where I was struggling bad with something, and then capturing a snapshot of that moment where I came out of that, where I showed myself my power, because for me, I want my artwork to be a representation. I don't want it to shy away and just pretend like everything is unicorn farts and roses, because it's not. But I want to capture a snapshot of that moment of empowerment, that moment of joy, be it a flower or whatever it is, however it is that it's going to manifest on the canvas. I want that to be what I put out into the world. And so like that's the way that I attach it to my artwork. But I also let it flow and be fluid and be whatever it needs to be in order to have that, because I know at the core of it, like I know why I'm doing what I do.
I think I will my final thought on this, because you guys, this is a big subject.
It's a big subject.
I'm actually finding it difficult to sort of crystallize this into a thing that doesn't go in a lot of directions. And so it's not even a probability. We will be talking about these things a lot going forward.
These things are important.
So knowing that what you can bring forth creatively into the world, you alone can do, right? Knowing that, I implore you to give yourself the best possible chance to do it. Why would you do anything less for yourself? And that means having your back, believing in yourself, thinking in ways that support your success. Don't give yourself anything less than that, knowing that if you don't bring forth your beauty and greatness into the world, no one else is going to. The world's going to miss out. So set yourself up as much as you can in the best possible way that you can to support that creative process. You would do it for someone else you believed in. Do it for yourself. That's my ask.
Yeah. Do it for yourself. I mean, I can't follow that up with anything really to add. The only thing I could add is make it a practice, a daily habit, to look at yourself in the mirror and just say the words, badass.
I'm such a badass.
I'm such a badass. All right? Just do that. Just remind yourself every day that you are a creative badass, you know, and be your biggest fan. Because really, out of everybody out there in the world, you are with you 24/7, right? And you don't want you to be over your shoulder whispering some bullcrap in your ear about how you can't do it. If anybody is going to be the most supportive, the most validating, the most, fight for your right to party, it's going to be you.
You've got to fight for your right to party. It's the law, because it's been written into a song. I also just want to add real quick, right? The objective here is not to get rid of your doubt. You're never going to get rid of your doubt.
And you can't get rid of brain chatter. It's going to happen.
It's always going to be there. I think the thing is to make it a little less heavy, have a dialogue with it, and make that dialogue fun, and be like, brain, let's talk about this idea that you've presented in a loving way so that we can let this go and move forward. It's a process for sure, but you can have more fun with it.
Gail said, I'm really struggling with two passions. I love designing and creating ball bridal gowns, but I love illustrating. I'm doing okay working on both, but sometimes it's a struggle. I would imagine that it's only a struggle when there might be a should attached to it. So that's something that I look at, because obviously I work on several different things. I love working on books. I love working on music. I love working on this. It's only when the shoulds come into my head that it makes it difficult.
It's true. Most creatives are going to have their hands in many pies. And it really is the shoulds that get in our way.
Ginger's like, Clea for prez.
Thanks, Ginger.
Barbara says, we can focus our energy on worrying about why something won't work out or why it will work out. And Inert Flow says, I have a meditation board. You draw on it with water.
And it looks like ink. And then all the drawings fade within a minute. It's helpful to get out icky thoughts and watch them just fade.
That is really cool.
That is cool.
I like that so much. Tequila doesn't always help, but it's worth a shot.
Hey-o.
Well, I think that brings us to the end of this podcast. Following Your Bliss. A lot came up in this podcast.
Yeah, so I want to feel like, whoa, that went a lot of places. But the fact of the matter is, that's kind of how this rolls when you're doing this internal self-investigation.
When we're sitting around a bonfire having these conversations for a podcast, then we get in deep. We got a little deep there, but hopefully you guys got something out of this. And a big shout out to the Rogues for being here. You guys are absolutely freaking amazing. Tyler says, "Oh, I love Buddha boards."
Is that what they're called?
Buddha boards?
That's dope. I like that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So thank you, Rogues, for being here. You guys are awesome. You always make these conversations so much fun and engaging. And for everybody listening to this at home, thank you guys so much for listening. We are back now, so we will be uploading a podcast every Friday. I know that we took a little bit of a break there for a while, so we are back. So if you like this and you'd like to subscribe or follow us or whatever platform you're on, whatever they do, go ahead and do that. And other than that, it's time to say goodbye. You want to say goodbye, Clee?
Good day.
Adios.